Have you ever wondered why the universe delivers a person who sets every atom in you on fire, only for Carl Jung to whisper that you must let them go? What if that impossible love isn't a cosmic mistake, but the map back to the parts of you still sleeping? Stay, because tonight we'll travel the fault lines of your heart and find out why the one you can't keep was sent to keep you awake. In the next few minutes, you will learn how Jung's theory of projection turns heartbreak into revelation, why sacred heartbreak is the fastest doorway to individuation, a practical ritual to harvest every lesson from the love that never was. If you've ever carried a name like a secret spell, replaying memories on a lonely loop, this story is yours. Leave a comment if you're ready to unlock what that person reflected in you. But first, breathe in. Let the night settle around us, because to understand the gift, we must step back to the moment the universe set the stage. Have you ever met someone whose presence felt like a return, not just to a person, but to a place your soul had long forgotten? They didn't feel new. They felt ancient, like déjà vu. You couldn't shake, like a dream you swore you'd lived before. They finished your thoughts. They spoke in a voice your bones remembered. And for a fleeting moment, the world finally made sense until it didn't. Because life, with all its quiet irony, made being with them impossible. Maybe they were already with someone else. Maybe distance timing fate, or some cruel cocktail of all three stood in the way. Whatever the reason, the result was the same. You were left holding something sacred in your chest, with no place to put it. And that's where the ache begins. Not the loud kind, not the kind that shatters you on the outside. No. This one lives in the almosts. It breathes through the what-ifs. It speaks only when it knows you're alone. But what if this pain wasn't punishment? What if this heartbreak was precision-crafted, designed not to destroy you, but to reveal you? You see, Carl Jung, the Swiss psychoanalyst who mapped the underworld of the soul, didn't believe in coincidence. He believed in synchronicity. He believed that when someone enters your life and leaves this kind of mark, it is not random. It is a summons, a quiet invitation to step into something far more mysterious than love itself. So ask yourself, what if they didn't come into your life to stay? What if they came to wake you? And if that's true, then the question becomes, wake you to what? What if the universe is not chaotic, but choreographed? What if the person you can't be with didn't just happen, but was placed deliberately, exquisitely, by something deeper than logic? Something your conscious mind couldn't plan, but your unconscious had been calling for all along. Carl Jung called it synchronicity, the mysterious alignment of outer events with inner states, as if the world itself were mirroring your soul's unfinished business. According to Jung, your psyche knows what you need before you do. It will draw into your orbit the exact people who reflect what you're ready to face and what you're still running from. So maybe this person showed up not to love you in the way you imagined, but to activate something inside you that had been sleeping. Maybe they came carrying not just chemistry, but code, the psychological keys to doors you were never brave enough to open on your own. You didn't fall in love by accident. You were being summoned by your own potential. And yes, it felt personal. Of course it did. But what if it was never just about them? What if it was always about you? The version of you they reflected back that you weren't fully living yet. Jung believed the soul speaks in symbols, And sometimes, a person is the symbol. They arrive, wrapped in mystery, dressed in electricity. You don't understand why you feel drawn to them. You just do. Like gravity, like fate. Like you've stumbled into a memory you haven't made yet. But here's the paradox. The stronger the pull, the less likely you are meant to possess them. Why? Because their role is too sacred, too catalytic, too precise. They weren't designed to fit into your life. They were designed to break it open. And so, we return to the ache. But this time, with new eyes. Because if this person didn't come to give you a happy ending, then what did they come to give you? That question takes us deeper into the mirror, not the one that flatters, but the one that frightens, the one that shows you what you could be if you stop playing small. If you're ready for that mirror, then let's step into it. The truth no one tells you is this: you didn't fall in love with them. You fell in love with the version of yourself that came alive in their presence. They didn't give you something new. They awakened something ancient, something you'd buried beneath years of shoulds and almosts. The way you spoke around them, the way your laughter sounded fuller, freer, unscripted, the way you dreamed in color again, that wasn't their magic. That was yours. They were just the mirror, the spark, the catalyst. Carl Jung called this projection a psychological phenomenon where we unconsciously assign pieces of ourselves to others, seeing not who they are, but who we're not yet ready to claim in ourselves. And in romantic love, projection is inevitable. We cast our unlived dreams into another's eyes. We trace our longings onto their skin. We convince ourselves, I need them to feel this way again. But the feeling was never in them. It was in you all along. They simply walked into the room and flipped the switch. Think about the qualities that pulled you in. Their confidence, their depth, their boldness, their ease. What if those traits didn't attract you? Because they were foreign, but because they were familiar to your soul. What if deep down you recognize them as fragments of your own becoming? Here's where it gets dangerous. We believe we must have the person to keep feeling alive. But Jung would warn that belief is a trap, because the real work was never about possessing them. It was about reclaiming yourself. So pause. Make a list not of their traits, but of the parts of you they woke up: the artist, the adventurer, the lover, the fire starter. Each one of them is a direction, a doorway. The person you couldn't keep was never meant to be a destination. They were meant to be your map. But here's the question that splits everything open. Now that you've seen who you could be, what will you do with that vision? Because longing is a start, but transformation requires more than memory. It requires movement. It requires choosing the path they pointed to, even when they're no longer walking beside you. And that brings us to heartbreak, but not the kind you think. The kind that doesn't break you down, it breaks you open. Let's go there. Heartbreak is a word we throw around casually, like it's just another flavor of pain. But this is different. This is the kind of rupture that feels hand-carved, as if an unseen artisan chiseled a crack straight through your chest so light could pour in where darkness once slept. It doesn't scream. It sings a low, haunting note you feel more than hear, vibrating in the chambers of your ribcage, reminding you that emptiness is also an echo, and echoes only exist where space has been made. Think of every myth where love and loss arrive side by side, Psyche and Eros, bound by ecstasy undone by a single candle flame. Orpheus turning too soon, losing Eurydice to the silence below. Each tale whispers the same forbidden gospel that the gate to transformation is guarded by a pain that feels fatal, but is in truth prenatal. The caterpillar liquefies before it takes flight. Why should your heart evolve with any less magnificence? Modern psychology backs the myth. MRI scans show a broken heart lights up the very same neural pathways as a body struck by physical harm. Your brain cannot distinguish between dagger and departure, so it floods you with endorphins and grief demanding you notice the fracture. Because every fracture is a future shape in disguise. But here's the alchemy. Jung invites us to practice feel it completely, then read it symbolically. If the pain is a messenger, what scroll is it carrying? If the ache is a compass, where is it pointing? Do not rush to numb it. Anesthetize the wound too quickly, and you forfeit the treasure buried beneath it. Instead, breathe into the fissure. Name what was awakened, desire, creativity, courage. Let tears become baptism, washing the dust off dreams you forgot you had. And as the days unspool, watch how the ache begins to contour you like a river sculpting stone, patient, relentless, inevitable. Because sacred heartbreak never breaks you down, it breaks you open. Open to paradox, to mystery, to dimensions of love that exist beyond possession or guarantee. The very fact that you can hurt this deeply is proof of how vividly you can live. Pain is not the opposite of life. Numbness is. So the question is no longer, why did they leave? The question is, what new world is now possible inside the cavity they revealed? That world has contours masculine and feminine, yin and yang. A mirrored architecture Carl Jung called Animus and Anima. If you're willing, let's step into that mirror next and meet the hidden counterpart who's been waiting for your arrival. There is a reason they felt so magnetic, so hauntingly familiar, as if they weren't just a person, but a piece of something missing inside you. According to Carl Jung, that's not imagination. It's memory. Not of a past life, but of a forgotten self. He called it the anima, and animus, the sacred inner counterpart that lives within each of us. The feminine in every man, the masculine in every woman. Not gendered roles, but symbolic energies, intuitive and rational, wild and ordered, receptive and active. When these forces fall out of balance, we begin projecting what's missing onto others, especially the ones who stir us the most. So when you met that person, the one who set your nervous system on fire and your soul into orbit, you weren't just meeting a lover. You were meeting the externalized version of your own inner wholeness. Your anima, your animus. The one you never learned to trust, so your psyche conjured them in another body to make you notice. Maybe they spoke their truth effortlessly because you've silenced yours for too long. Maybe they moved through life with certainty because you've waited in doubt for years. Maybe their creative fire felt like prophecy because it was meant to ignite the artist in you, still hiding in the shadows. They didn't just attract you, they activated you. But projection is a fragile thing. We don't fall in love with who they are, we fall in love with what they unlock. And when reality doesn't match the myth we've cast, the illusion crumbles and we feel betrayed. Not because they lied, but because we were looking into a mirror and mistook it for a door. Yet this too is sacred, because now you know what's been dormant inside you. Now you've seen it. And once seen, You cannot unsee. So the question no longer is, how do I get them back? It's how do I reclaim what they reflected? That is the true work. To take the fragment of yourself that they lit up and bring it home. To stop outsourcing your aliveness. To stop waiting for someone to walk into your life so you can finally become who you were always meant to be. But that kind of love, the one that doesn't possess but transforms, requires a new language, a new definition. Not love for ownership, but love as recognition. And that's where we go next, because the deepest love is not about keeping. It's about seeing. We've been taught that love means having, that to love someone fully is to keep them close, to define the edges of the relationship, to build a life around shared tomorrows. But the soul has a different vocabulary. And sometimes the deepest form of love has nothing to do with staying and everything to do with seeing. Jung believed that love in its highest form is not transactional. It is not built on expectation or reciprocity. It is a mirror held up with reverence, a recognition of the sacred in another. To love someone in this way is to witness their essence without needing to own it. It's to bow to the mystery they carry, knowing it was never yours to unravel. Most people never reach this level. They confuse attachment with affection and think closeness means control. So when someone stirs something ancient in them, but refuses to fit the mold, they call it a curse. They label it bad timing. They mourn it like a theft. But what if it's none of those things? What if this love came not to fulfill you, but to reveal you? What if its purpose was not to stay, but to rewire your understanding of what love could be? Because here's the paradox. When you stop trying to possess love, that's when you actually become capable of holding it, not in your hands, but in your being. That person, the one you couldn't be with, may have taught you more about love than any long-term partner ever could. They taught you that love isn't a contract. It's a mirror. It's a catalyst. It's a presence. And most of all, it's a practice. A way of seeing the world, of relating to others, without needing to reshape them to soothe your own fears. But here's where it gets dangerous. If you're not careful, you'll romanticize the pain. You'll build a temple out of absence and worship a ghost instead of walking forward. So before we go deeper, we must pause here. Because loving without possession also means letting go of the illusion that pain is the proof of depth. Not all heartbreak is holy. Some of it is just avoidance dressed in poetry. And that brings us to the next threshold. Where does deep love end and self-deception begin? If you're brave enough, let's go there now. There's a dangerous kind of beauty in loving someone you cannot have. It feels poetic. It feels sacred. It feels like proof that your soul still remembers how to burn. But sometimes, the flame you keep alive isn't love at all. It's avoidance, wrapped in nostalgia, perfumed with longing. Carl Jung warned us, the psyche doesn't always seek truth. Sometimes it seeks comfort in familiar wounds, even if those wounds bleed silently beneath the surface. And few wounds are more seductive than the heartbreak we choose to hold on to. The love that was almost, the words that were never said, the life you replay in your mind, not because it ever fully existed, but because it gave you permission to feel deeply again. But here's the trap. Pain, when left unchecked, can become identity. You begin to wear sorrow like a second skin. You build altars in your mind to the person who never stayed, not because they're holy, but because you've forgotten how to feel alive without them. Romanticizing the pain turns healing into hesitation. You stop moving forward. You mistake feeling deeply for living fully. You begin to think that ache in your chest is proof of love when it's actually proof of stagnation. And the longer you linger in that half-lit place, the harder it is to tell the difference between soul work and self-sabotage. So pause. Ask yourself gently, without judgment, am I honoring what I learned from this love? Or am I clinging to the hurt because it makes me feel significant? Have I mistaken the depth of the experience for a destination I was meant to live in forever? Because the pain was real, the connection was powerful, but it was never meant to be your prison. It was meant to be your portal. The difference between heartbreak and transformation is what you choose to do next. And that brings us to the turning point. How do you take what they reflected in you and make it your own? If you're ready to stop worshiping the absence and start embodying the lesson, then the next step is yours. Let's walk it together. They were not a destination. They were a direction. The glow you saw in their eyes was the reflection of light you forgot you carried. The passion you felt when they spoke the fire in their presence, the way they moved through life like it was art. You didn't fall in love with them. You fell in love with what they revealed was possible for you. Carl Jung believed every projection holds a message. And the most sacred ones, the ones that shatter us, carry not a person, but a summons. You were summoned by your own unlived life, and now, the only question that matters is, will you answer the call? Start here. Make a list, not of the memories, but of the qualities that magnetized you. Was it their courage, their confidence, their authenticity, their creativity? Now ask, where does that same energy already live in me, even if it's small, hidden, or afraid? You don't need to become someone else. You only need to reclaim the parts of yourself you saw shining through them. Let their presence be a blueprint, not for who to chase, kobu, but for who to become. Because here's the truth. You weren't meant to keep them. You were meant to integrate them. Every moment you shared was a mirror. Every wound they touched was a doorway. Every longing they awakened was a part of you screaming to be lived. And now they are gone. But the echo remains. So build a life that doesn't need to replay their memory to feel alive. Build a self so aligned, so full, so embodied, that their absence no longer feels like a hole, but a spark that lit the beginning of everything. You are not the same person who met them. You are what grew in their wake. You are the garden that bloomed after the storm they stirred. But to become that version of you fully, you must release the fantasy. You must step out of the mirror and walk into your life. And that life begins when you shift from longing to living. Let's take that step next. Longing is a beautiful place to visit, but it is a terrible place to live. There comes a moment when memory must make way for movement. When the echo of who they made you feel you could be must give way to the embodiment of who you are now becoming. You can't keep circling the fire, hoping it will warm you again. At some point, you must become the fire, because there is a version of you standing quietly at the edge of your awareness who is already living the life they only reflected, already walking with the confidence you admired, already loving with the depth you thought only they could unlock. They are not in the past. They are in you, but ahead of you, waiting, not for rescue, but for recognition. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious holds not just wounds, but blueprints. That within you, is the pattern of your fullest potential, and every encounter that stirs you is a signal to take one step closer to that pattern unfolding. So what does that step look like? It could be small. A decision made with integrity. A truth spoken when silence would be safer. A risk taken where fear once ruled. It could be quiet. A morning walked in solitude. A journal open, not for answers, but for raw honesty. A moment of beauty noticed without needing to capture it. Living begins when longing no longer owns you, when the ache becomes action, when the reflection becomes reality. And no, they don't need to see it. They don't need to come back, because they weren't your future. They were your spark. But you are the one who carries the flame. So now, as your feet touch ground again, not in fantasy, but in presence, you must ask, how do I walk forward with what I now know about who I truly am? Because this isn't the end of the story. This is the beginning of yours. And that brings us to the final gift, not from them, but from you, to you. Are you ready to receive it? Some people leave, but not empty-handed. They take a version of you with them, the version that only ever existed in their presence. And for a while, you mourn that version more than you mourn them. But what if that memory was never meant to be preserved like a relic, but reborn as a mission? The love, the ache, the aliveness, none of it was wasted. It was seed. Carl Jung said that the psyche never forgets. Every encounter is stored not just as data, but as destiny still in progress. And if they cracked you open, if they showed you your edges, your softness, your hunger for a life more vivid, then your task now is not to rebuild the old shell, but to grow something from that exposed soil. Let memory become your compass. Let it remind you of what you're capable of feeling, of becoming, of radiating into the world. You don't honor them by staying frozen in the moment you lost them. You honor them by becoming the version of yourself they were meant to awaken. They came as a mirror, but you are the one who must carry the reflection forward. Maybe your mission now is to live as if the spark they lit in you was never meant to go out, to create something, to heal someone, to write the words they never got to hear, to love without armor, to walk with your soul in the open, not in their direction, but in your own. And when the silence grows loud again, as it will, and the ghost of what could have been brushes past your thoughts, you won't shrink. You'll smile, not because it didn't hurt, but because you used the hurt, because you turned heartbreak into fuel and memory into momentum. This is your life now. Not a life you build after them, but a life you build because of them. They were never meant to stay. They were meant to awaken, but you are the one who stays. You are the one who creates. You are the one who remembers and becomes. So go. Live with the intensity they mirrored. Speak with the truth they unlocked. And love with the freedom they taught you was possible, because they weren't the gift. You were. And now finally, you've unwrapped yourself.